Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life discussion. The Psychology and Spirituality weekly talks are based on the works by Joanna de Angelis, and we're here to offer this safe space to confront, compare, correlate, and expand spirituality concepts from a psychological lens. I am so very happy to be with you again, Yuri. Yuri Castro is here with us to talk a little bit about health and well-being, right? And how the attainment of health and well-being leads to an approach to holistic health or health holistically. But what is holistic health, right? I'd like to hear from you, Yuri, about this. What is holistic health? What is this approach to health? And it's one, right, that really it's a key ingredient that health recognizes and addresses the interconnectedness between the body, the mind, and the spirit. And as we all know, Joanna de Angelis, through her books and teaches, she emphasizes that indeed health and well being are deeply interconnected with both our physical and spiritual dimensions. But we are going to be here today exploring that interconnectedness of the body, mind, and spirit, how our health and mental well being are linked with both our physical and spiritual dimensions. So, with that, I want to know, Yuri, can you tell us a little bit, just to start, what is holistic health? What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Marcia. Hello, everybody that's watching us, listening to us. It's always a pleasure to be here. This is a very interesting topic, one that is very dear to me. And when we're talking about holistic health, the word holistic, we hear nowadays, I believe, a lot of the talk about holistic medicine and holistic approaches to physical health, and which is very interesting. But in here today, I like what you said about the connection between mind, body, and spirit. So the holistic meaning as a whole, as it's what we consider to be, the ultimate way of approaching our health. And by health, we're talking about mental health, physical health, emotional health, and ultimately spiritual health as well. So I think that it is of, like I said, utmost importance for us to be talking about this connection. What are some aspects that can impact our health, aka
Mhm.
disease and disorders, and how we can best approach them.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to take a moment, Yuri, too. In one of her books, Joanna, it's so funny. She correlates health and well-being, right, to a project. I don't know if you read that book, but she talks about a project, any project, right? And I'm a project manager, so I completely embraced that thought, and I was like, "Okay, Joanna, let's do this." And agreeing completely with her because she highlights, right, in a project as a metaphor for your health, but from a project perspective, how important it is to plan, right, to to make it that a very specific moment before a project is executed, to plan. And when you do this, you are able to achieve a successful, well executed project. So, for example, um, for me, the quality of any of my projects outcome will depend on my project planner, right? For all of you project managers, I'm sure you're smiling and agree with me, but my project outcome will depend on my careful planning. For example, that includes the estimation of my effort, the projection of my outcomes, calculations, and all of it will lead to this, what we call, or ensure or help support flawless execution. And in continue that thinking, Yuri, I was thinking that what happens when we don't plan well? as project managers or not, and this is again correlating with health, right? Well, Joanna de Angelis really, she warns us that if we don't plan well, we fail, right? Most of the times. And from our health perspective, she brings that idea of linking our thoughts to how we judge and we dwell with the ideations or that fixation of negative thoughts on our past. And we talk about our past misdeeds, our past failures, etc., etc. And as a result, we we are more vulnerable to falling ill. And we're talking now about mental health as well as spiritual health because of a failure. So she links that together in a really interesting understanding that health, well being, personal success, right, material or not, are really, really largely influenced by our perspective, our mindset, and of course, our actions. I'd love if we can talk a little bit more about that. If we can talk about perhaps even the idea of wanting or desiring or beliefs and how they all become part of this construct of our framework to live life and ensure our well-being, just like a project manager would.
Of course, of course. I like that approach, or that way of looking at it, and the project, the planning, the execution. I think just to talk about that first, I really like that analogy, obviously. And Joanna even talks about that when we are healthy, we have the opportunity to preserve ourselves. So we have to take advantage of that to preserve our health, and that again, psychological, physical,
Mhm.
etc. And if we're sick, we should thank God and expand our mental horizons in love to recover. And this idea to when you're talking about the planning is, I think it's interesting because it made me think of how oftentimes we abuse our bodies. We don't treat our bodies as we should, so we're not planning ahead for our health. So sickness may arise, a disease may arise, or even mentally, when we're not taking care or we're not planning well, air quotes here, for our mental health, we may see the development of disorders, mental disorders. So this idea, I think it's very important for us. It's almost like to think ahead, and when we're healthy, to cultivate what we have, and when we are sick, to thank God and be put ourselves in with loving thoughts and all of that. And I think it connects very well with the idea what you're saying about planning ahead and the execution afterwards, because the
Yeah.
sickness is a result. It's not the road. Is a result oftentimes when we don't take care of ourselves.
Can I add a little very personal moment
Sure.
note here, Yuri, because you're talking about the planning ahead. Well, I was just recently been with my father. Caveat to everyone, my father's almost 102 years of age. So he had an infection on the legs tendon. There's a very weird and long Latin term. I will not repeat it here, but anyways, it was an infection in his leg, and just a it's a long story, but I'm going to shorten it by saying that his body, 101-year-old body, could not take the antibiotics well. So they said you need to do intravenous. Well, intravenous means you have to go to a hospital. At his age, immediately put him in an intensive care unit. So he comes in here, he's completely sane in his mind. His body is really as good as it gets, right? And I was there visiting him, and doctor after doctor would come to him, and they would ask him, "Do you know?" Very, it was a geriatric ICU unit. So, do you know why you're here? And he would go, yes, blah, 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 and this is the blah, 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 blah. And he would have this very, very interesting conversation. And they would all, every single one, just be taken aback by his ability, cognitively speaking, to understand why he was there and what happened, etc., etc. And they all invariably would ask, what's the secret? What's the secret, for your health and well-being?
Yes.
And interesting enough, it goes right into what you're saying earlier, Yuri. That's why I interrupted, because he talks about the planning and understanding that, and this is a core spiritist concept, that we do things even when we don't intend to harm ourselves,
Yes.
that are considered long-term suicide, right? So if I drink too much, if I smoke, if I um, whatever, nothing moderation will lead to that as well. So he was talking about this core principle of spiritism about, if you don't plan, and if you don't fall prey to those excesses, then you can have, anybody could have this long life, and be well. And I just love it because it goes
Mm-hmm.
right into a conversation here.
Exactly. And I think that when we're young, we're, we elude ourselves thinking
Yeah,
that our bodies are going to be that way forever. So
yeah,
oftentimes we may see, mistakes being made
yeah.
throughout years that we're only going to see the results, like I said, at the end. It's not
Hmm.
even the road. It's the result of the lack of planning, the lack of care, and planning,
Yes.
is synonym with care in this situation. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's talk more about that want and belief,
Yes.
and how does it all come together, if you don't mind.
No, of course. I no, I the wanting and believing is something that Joanna de Angelis talks about,
Mm,
and she brings up this idea of how it's important for to reestablish, she says, inner security, of
mm,
the patient. You need to
mm,
have the wanting and you need to have the believing as well. So let's say when we're talking about holistic health, when we're talking about achieving this
mm.
holistic health, this health as a whole, we have to think about the wanting and believing. The wanting, in a way, being this idea of, do I really want it? And two, do I believe I can get it? Do I believe I can achieve it? Do I really believe I can receive the blessing if I'm asking for a blessing of,
Oh, I love it. Uh-huh.
a healthy life or a healthy trajectory in this earth here? Do I really believe I can get that when I'm praying, when I'm sick, let's say, and I'm praying for the cure? Do I really believe that? And I think that's such a key element of this faith element that often goes unnoticed. Would you say?
Well, and it's a role of a lot of research, actually, right, Yuri?
Oh yes.
Especially in the field of the ologies, like oncology, especially where you may, as a doctor, you may be treating a patient that has, for example, already the cancer has metastasized, and it's like, oh, you have 3 months, right? You have 3 months to live, and all of a sudden, those same patients just recuperate
Yes.
brilliantly. And from a physical science, it's unexplained. One could
Mm-hmm.
say it is a miracle, other could say it's the faith, but it's at one point here specifically, I believe, is from Joanna's work, right? That the role of desiring deeply, to wanting deeply your health in this case, but also
Yes.
believing, as you mentioned, right? Having faith that you deserve that. They really are key in that process of healing, self-healing, right? In this case of, for example, cancer. And also, in addition to self-healing, to overcoming the suffering inherent to the pain of a sick body in this case. Right?
I agree. I agree, and it is interesting that, again, the wanting and believing, almost like a pair,
Yeah,
and she's, they go hand in hand in the
yeah,
road to recovery, or in the road to sustained health. because
Mm-hmm.
we have our frail bodies, and
Yeah.
in our minds as well, we're still developing as
Yeah. Yeah.
immortal spirits.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we may very well, and we will continue to stumble, but we gotta rise again and continue the walk and learn from the stumbles that we find along our path. But the one thing she talks about, and I like that she makes this distinction. She's talking about wanting as making a decision. So I love that she
Mm-hmm.
puts some sort of authorship in a way of the wanting. It's not
Yes.
just words, is actions, is decisions. And she talks about um, abandoning parasitic accommodations. I always thought this was very interesting. Or
Yeah.
the fear of taking new responsibilities. So
And
oftentimes,
I have to tell you, the minute that you talk about the reference to parasitic, right? It's really important. We can break it down further because
oh
my
yeah,
mind went straight into so many different imagery, right? Including, if I may, before you go back to your thought process there, but the idea that, let's say, a young tree, and you have a relationship of parasitic relationship with whatever vine, and the vine needs the tree for the structure and the nutrients, right? But the more it gets the nutrients, the the less powerful and able to sustain is the tree.
yeah. The weaker the tree gets, yeah.
Yes, and at some point, that relationship is so strong that if you were to cautiously or not remove that vine, the tree would die because it no longer has
Yep.
what it takes to sustain. So it's very interesting. We can talk a lot more about it if you
Oh,
want, but I love that idea that you're bringing up the emphasis on the strong. It's not just like, oh, maybe, maybe Yuri, I wanted to heal, right? No, that's the strong decision to heal, and healing because of the what we said before, mind, body, and spirit connection. That decision to heal usually will have a close relationship with the decision to change something.
absolutely. And it's again, it seemed very interesting. The focus on the decision, the focus on
Mhm.
like I said, authorship, and the focus
Yes.
of that I
Yeah.
am responsible. That's another key word too, responsibility. I am
Mhm.
responsible for making those changes. And I love the example of the tree and the vine because it makes so much
Mhm.
sense. And Joanna, always good with her words, talks about
Yeah.
abandoning parasitic accommodation, because
Mhm.
being accommodated, being in the status quo,
Yeah.
oftentimes is going to lead us nowhere. That's not going to lead us to progress. So when we're
Mhm.
accommodated in unhealthy thoughts, when we're accommodated in unhealthy ways of living our lives, that's going to be like the parasite that keeps feeding and feeding and taking away and sapping their
Mhm.
energy, sapping that health and that life from us. So she's talking.
Mhm.
I love that the example that you gave of the
Yeah.
tree about this decision, then we have to make the decision. And
Yeah.
then the other one that I wanted to mention too is the believing, the second, the twin, let's call the twin.
Yes. Yeah.
The
That's the side of
believing,
the formula, right? On one
right?
side
Yeah,
has
yeah.
the want, the desire, but the other one is, well, the faith, the belief that that desire can be met, right?
And again, always so good with her words. She talks about the believing as being this serious decision, one that correlates with emotional
Mhm.
maturity, which is great. Emotional maturity. So means that faith is almost as this thing that the longer we're practicing it, the longer we're trying to really have that true belief, the more we're going to be able to achieve that. And she's talking
Mhm.
how belief lives innately in man, and I love that
Yeah.
because as
Yeah.
right, what do you think? As sparks of the love of our God, of our Father, our Heavenly Father, we all have that innate love in us, and she says that it awaits the stimuli to make it blossom, to make this
Yeah.
belief blossom. What do you think?
Yeah, I love it. I have a different image, right? Which underscore that innate love in us. So scratch the project planner, project planner metaphor here. But if you look into a different metaphor that maybe highlights or express or gives a mental picture of that, is the metaphor of a young child, right? So the child starts with smaller movements and then starts to having
Yes.
the muscle to reach up, right? And then crawl. And finally, the most amazing thing, Yuri, that I think in a human's body is the ability to go from crawling to standing to walking to running,
Right.
dancing, all the spatial movements that we human beings have, that is so gracefully. We talk about I don't know, a Mikhail Baryshnikov's dancing, or a Michael Phelps swimming, or Michael Jordan with basketball. It doesn't matter, sport, dance, or simply just moving through nature in a trail, and all ups and downs, and our body can do it. But it all starts with that movement that is innate, right?
Absolutely.
No physics engineer or doctor of physics came to explain to the parents that the child would have to have this length to this proportion to this muscle mass before the child walks. It is all in there, that ability to do it, to grow. And I love that that thought process, that imagery, right? But
No,
go ahead.
yeah.
I
And
stole from you your
no, no, I
thoughts.
like that. If I may use that, as you're talking about, the child. I have a 1 year old, so I really see like him starting to like run and like walk very well, and my older one who's 5 definitely already runs so much, and the 1 year old wants to run with the 5 year old, but he can't. So
Yeah,
it's very interesting to see, and as you're making that analogy, and I thought of my sons, I also thought of, if we look from a more macro standpoint, so if we zoom out
yeah,
and we see ourselves, in our the evolution of our immortal spirit and all the ways we still have to go where
yeah,
we will get. We're like these children who are
yeah,
already starting to know to walk, but we stumble, we fall, we waver, and it's almost like that in our faith, in our decisions, I think. But if we were to know where we're gonna get, if we were to like really visualize and say we're gonna get there one day where we are swimming like a Michael Phelps spiritually, or
yeah,
playing basketball like a Michael Jordan spiritually, then we
yeah.
would be able to understand and really, really continue to work and believe.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, right? Because it goes back to the decision, the strong inner decision to whatever. And I read, I love biographies. So read a long time ago the biography of Michael Phelps, and it took him this moment to decide. He was depressed, right, before he went back to his third Olympics, the one that he got all the gold medals. But it was decision, either I will stay depressed, because it happens to athletes of that
Oh yeah,
caliber, right? After finished, it's you spend decades of your life to seconds of that moment that you
of
achieved that.
seconds of performance, and
It's
he is very open about mental health, which is
Yes,
great for the field.
he's
Yes.
he's an advocate, right? Of that is awesome. But his decision was, yes, I take the challenge. I'll do it. But as you mentioned, it does not mean a decision and that's it. There was that commitment to change his body, right? To become the Michael Phelps we know, that reached record number of gold medals. And I think this is an important aspect of this conversation today, because and you referenced already this from Joanna de Angelis, that we should, and this is an invitation for all of us, right? Let's decide, let's want, let's believe that we deserve. Let's make the
Uh
decision,
huh.
that
Yes.
very intentional decision, and let's abandon a sense of I don't know, complacency, or worst of all, self-doubt, right, Yuri? I know you work in mental health field, and you know probably how many patients come dealing with that enormous self-doubt, which leads to which is a product of fear, but may lead to anxiety, etc., etc., right? But that once we make those decisions, we are now open to be, metaphorically speaking, the Michael Phelps, the Michael Jordan, whatever, any other Michael, spiritually speaking, but that we can be as healthy, as happy as we can ever want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that sense that let's make the decision, let's work on it, and let's achieve that.
Yes. Let's work on it. Let's achieve it. And Joanna, in the
Mhm.
same on the same note, she warns that the wanting and believing they lead to struggle, which is good too to for us to realize that it's not going to be a quote unquote walk in the park. It's not going to be something that is very easy, because oftentimes we're gonna be working against these parasitic tendencies that we have fostered
Yes,
through multiple
yeah,
lives even. So
yes,
it's
yeah,
there's a lot of the chains, there's a lot of those things holding us back, that weight that's holding us back from the changes that we want to achieve. But we need to believe and understand that it's going to lead to struggle. And another thing,
yeah,
again, I love the way she uses these words to paint a picture. She's saying that the struggle is going to be like it's making the decision to leave the dark cave for the, I think it's field of success or something like that, she
yeah.
says. So like leaving like this dark cave. So she's painting this visual image. What do you think?
I love it. I love it. It goes back to the project planning, right? If I don't know if you know this, Yuri, because you don't live in Georgia, but several years ago, and it was very interesting because my 101-year-old dad, his professional life was a civil engineer working with roads,
Oh,
right? So that's his life, and I think I was, I don't know, out of the country. I come back and found out that while I was gone, the underpass of one of the arteries of Atlanta, where I lived, Atlanta is known for its terrible traffic, but
uh-huh.
one major overpass, it collapsed. It collapsed. So we had I think it was right what they call the spaghetti junction, because it looks like spaghetti with so many overpasses. But right there, it just collapsed. Nobody died, but there was this hole that increased the complexity of traffic in Atlanta. And this was called the Miracle Project, because in 1 month, they were able to fix it. So I mentioned that to my dad
Wow.
at the time, and he said, "Do you realize that this is uh, a government type, a city, state, or federal project to fix that? As such, it requires bidding. Usually, bidding takes more than a month." It did. And you're able to do it, and I think that exemplifies this idea of success that you're talking about, right? If you know where you're going, and if you do it intentionally at the speed, in this case, that you want, you can get it. Even the most completely crazy in the mind of somebody who worked his whole life with that, this is impossible. Well,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
it's not impossible, right? We, like the fixing of this overpass that failed, we can all reach to our full potential. I wanted to change a little bit of our discussion, if you don't mind, because I wanted to maybe talk a lot about um, the spiritual nature of healing, and mentioned in the beginning, and the importance of inner transformation, right? How do we um, overcome the notion of pain, of suffering that usually comes with our body or our minds, our emotional bodies not being healthy. And how can we heal in a way that leads us to achieve true health, but involving the two, you said the twins, right? The want and the belief, but how does it also connect with the idea to spiritual growth, spiritual wellness, and inner transformation? Can we maybe talk a
Absolutely.
little bit more about it?
Yes, and as you're talking about that, made me think of the history we have in the Bible with the paralytic or the paraplegic nowadays,
Yeah, yeah,
that Jesus healed, and he asked him like, "Do you believe I can heal you?" And he said yes. So Jesus, seeing that his expiation was probably over, healed him. But as we learned from Amelia Rodriguez, which is another one of the authors that we were graced to have the words by Divaldo Franco, right?
yeah,
She recounts how that Nathaniel, the paralytic, he went and was not in good company and not doing very positive things after he received the blessing of the health. So I think that when you're talking about spiritual health and connecting that with the twins, the want and the belief,
uh-huh,
that we just coined as twins now, the want and the belief, he
uh-huh,
had that. Nathaniel, in that moment, he had that want and the belief. But what did he do with the blessing? What did he do after he was healthy? After
yeah,
Jesus granted that to him, he
yeah,
went, to live among unhappy women and drunken men. I think that's what Amelia talks about. So then
yeah,
he went back to in his spiritual growth, almost like as if doing the same, making the same mistakes, which is
yeah,
something that Jesus often warned when he healed people. Don't go and like sin no more, or
yes.
don't make the same mistake, so worse will come to you, something like that. So that's what made me think when you mentioned the spiritual sort of like trajectory or role in this equation.
Yeah, and it's very important for us to perhaps reflect upon, right? Um, Healing is not a reward, right? It's not a punishment to be sick, to be unwell, but it's not a reward, an award, a prize that you get
Yes,
it, right? So it's very important for us to understand. Um, Healing is a byproduct, if I will, and see if I'm going to the right direction here, Yuri. It's a byproduct of how well I am, how balanced I am, how harmoniously I am with the divine laws, for example. And by divine laws
amazing.
is right, how can we connect with God? How can we be our authentic self and not hurt ourselves or hurt others and cause pain to ourselves and to the others? So, in that regards, in another law, divine law, which is the law of cause and effect, um, we suffer to which we cause, but the suffering is not for, again, punishment, it is for learning. So if we learn, then there is no need to have all that it takes that will lead us to learn. Does it make sense what I'm saying? Right? All
Yeah,
of yuckiness that life brings us is to push us, to trigger us, to catapult us into a different platform of thoughts and authenticity that leads to that connection to love, to harmony, to be integral with everybody else in this world. And it takes learning, right? Just like the child, back
it does.
to the idea of the child, it's not that you're going to be, the idea is for you to suffer when you fall down, right? As you learn to walk. It's to learn to walk. That's the the purpose. And when you get to walk, now you learn to run. And when you learn to run, you learn the rhythm and so on and so forth. So I love that idea that it's all that we are immersed in this galaxy, this universe, this sea of love that is God, right? We live with a, to me, God is love, God is life, and we are God. We're immersed in this universe, and it is all about pushing us to grow, right? In all its
Absolutely.
expressions. Yeah.
Again, the idea that you brought about the balance. I think when
Yeah.
we're talking about balance, I think the key word is equilibrium, balance,
Yes.
any
Yeah.
synonyms like that, because in a way,
Mm-hmm.
this is interesting as I think about it. In a way, it's like it's the road and it's also the destination. So finding this
Yes.
balance, this equilibrium in
Yeah.
our lives as we progress, because Joanna de Angelis says this very well, and we talked a little bit about this in our episode of Origins of Suffering, when we
Yes.
talked about the expiations, and Joanna saying that is the restoration of the lost balance of
Yeah.
something that we deviated, and now we must, because of the law of action and reaction, we must bring it back to that sort of the balance, that
Yeah.
middle ground, which is beautiful to think that it's not a punishment. It
Yeah.
is something that we are having to endure when we're talking about expiations. And if we bring back to the health portion, with we can think about very like severe health conditions, things like that, that may very well be expiations to restore this sort of balance from previous lives, or even from this
Yeah.
the same life that we have those sort of challenges. So balance, in a way, it's like the trajectory. So it's the road, and it's also the destination. It's where what we want to achieve eventually.
Yeah, and if we go further into this idea of balance or equilibrium, and Joanna de Angelis, right? She brings the notion because and I like to do this parenthetical note here, Yuri, because there's a lot of publications and movies about how bad your ego is, right? And we're moving away from our egoic constructs, and then we say, and she says, no, no, we live. There's a reason for us to be living this material life, which requires the creation of this personality, right? Yuri Castro, Marcia Trajano here, and in our individualities and personalities created for this existence, the ego is the mechanism for us to be able to survive a material life. What is the problem then? And the problem is that we forget our spiritual essence, and the self with a capital S, as Joanna de Angelis puts,
Yes.
is right, is our spiritual nature, and the answer to all of our woes are the sense of equilibrium or balance with the X's she calls
Mm-hmm.
ego self. So when we understand that we are as spirit living a material life, a material existence, and to live a material existence, we need an ego, but the ego is not bigger or over the self and vice versa, because if we don't live a material life, it will go back to, interesting enough, right? The idea of being in a monastery, which I find it fascinating and quite beautiful, by the way. But live in a monastery, not speaking in silence and praying in adoration, that's living a completely devout spiritual life in worship God, but that's not why we're here. That's not why we incarnate. We incarnate exactly to be in the world. And to be in the world, we need that ego to create our personality to survive. So it's a very paradoxical view,
Yes.
but it is one that is the same, what you're saying, right? It's that balance, the
Is the
balance that we need.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is the balance, and she talks about maintaining psychic and emotional balance, of being this of like fundamental importance for maintaining
Hmm.
health,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
health, as a whole, in a holistic way of looking
Mhm.
at health. And I think we can even
Mhm.
start talking about a little bit about ways to sort of like achieve that health and
Yeah.
to maintain that health, because she talks about cultivating, healthy and optimistic thoughts based on love. And this idea that I think is so important, and it's so interesting how, psychology and spiritism sort of, they become congruent in this sort of what
Mhm.
beautiful way about positive thoughts and cultivating this optimistic thoughts.
Yeah.
And spiritism even going further and talking about the power of our thoughts, the real like power, and the way they can modulate, create, construct, destruct,
Yeah.
deconstruct. They can do so many things that we're starting to really become aware of how our thoughts can really shape our reality. And by our reality, we have to talk about health. So I
Yes.
think we can approach a little bit about how these thoughts can impact health in general. What do you think?
I love it. I really appreciate you because we're about done with our conversation today. So I think this is a very good leading to a conclusion, right? Which is really not only as we started talking about the take an active role in our health, but what about our thought process? Tell us more your thoughts or Joanna's thoughts on that, Yuri, if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
Absolutely. Joanna emphasizes
Mhm.
this very well, and I love the way she phrases things, and talking about how we can change, and we can and should
Yeah.
change the climate that we breathe in.
Yes.
So like the our environment, and having
Yeah.
this idea of the actions of this wanting the belief, knowing the struggle, but also being able to cultivate these positive thoughts and not let our balance, our
Hmm.
psychic balance, become completely um, like go to waste
Yeah.
by occurrences, by
Yeah.
difficulties along the path. We must cultivate this faith, this love. Prayer is a very, very good way of sort of cultivating good thoughts and being able to be grateful. Joanna has a whole book on gratitude and how that can impact our physical health, and she goes to talking about the neurotransmitters and like the endocrine system, the pulmon, like the respiratory system, everything. So how gratitude, positive thoughts, prayer, all those things can really, really impact our physical health, psychological health, and as a result, the tripod, our
Hmm.
spiritual health as well.
Yeah. I love it. I think that that book, Psychology of Gratitude, I
Yes,
believe is
that's
the
the one.
title, right? It is absolutely a must if you are neophyte to Joanna de Angelis or not, if you're a spiritist or not, if you're a psychologist or not. I think all of us would benefit from what I believe is one of the best in her work, right? The Psychology of Gratitude, which happens to be the last book of her
Mm-hmm.
16
Yes,
book series on psychological series. So I think it's gorgeous there.
it is.
Yeah, I wanted to perhaps think in terms of some of the takeaways from this, right, from our discussion today, and we started with the importance of planning, the importance of having an active role, right, in how you are in your health and well-being. We also talked a little bit about the twins, the want and the belief, and finally, well, we talked a little bit about inner transformation. Finally, we ended with the construction of your thoughts, right? Your thinking really deliberates your health. um, Before we close, do you have any final thoughts? And I would like to conclude for today.
I think, again, emphasizing the idea of authorship, this idea
Yes.
that we are capable and we are responsible for
Yes.
our health. And that
Yes.
is a very broad statement on purpose, because again, giving sort of like tools for people who are watching or listening to us, I think it's very good that we close on the idea of the gratitude, of thoughts, of prayer,
Yes.
Because if anybody's wondering, okay, that's great, this is all theoretical and I love, how can I change? There you go.
Yes,
Thoughts,
yes.
prayers, exercising the gratitude so we can impact our holistic health, mind, spirit, and body.
Absolutely, absolutely. There are many different concepts that we could talk about the mind-body connection, right? On how to understand your physical health, etc. But I think it's important for us to really look into some of the teachings that we're giving here through. We actually reference what, three, four, five books from Joanna de Angelis. So she brings the notion of health and well-being in many of her work, and overall, we're here to talk about how health and well-being is really this holistic process, right,
It
Yuri?
is. Mm-hmm.
And as a process, and I think the emphasis here is a process, we must understand that emotional, mental, spiritual health, they're equally important than your physical health. And we could talk about how to go about addressing those symptoms, etc., etc. But I think what I would like to conclude our talk today is to understand that for us to maintain our health while we understand that deep connection between mind, body, and spirit is to understand that all of it, all the influences, external and internal influences, which includes our own energy, right, Yuri? Our spiritual energy, all of those will sustain our physical body and will protect us from destructive agents if we achieve that balance between
Excellent.
emotional and mental well-being, right? So let us practice that. I think it's important for us to be courageous, Yuri, to reach that mental and emotional spiritual balance and want, right? Want and believe that you and I, all of us, can overcome any state that requires healing and become healthy. So, with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so very much. If this is the first time that you're with us, just remind us, be reminded that Psychology in Spirituality weekly talks are that we are here every week, and the topics of discussions are based on the works by Joanna de Angelis, and you're able to understand and with those perhaps thought-provoking discussions, right, to expand your own spirituality concepts and juxtaposing them with your own concepts, your own perspectives. And I want to, before we close, to thank our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AME Brazil. AME Brazil is the Brazilian arm of the Medical Spiritist Association. Hope to have you back during our next episode. If you have not done so, love if you can hit subscribe so that you can check us out for the next episodes. Thank you, Yuri. I loved this time with you, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, everybody.